Hi, I'm Nina Melendez, and welcome to LinkedIn News Live, a show about the world of work and our place in it. Today, we are talking about the phenomenon of failing up. That's when the colleague who is incompetent somehow manages to rise to the top, get the promotions and raises, and find themselves in positions of power. And studies show that this tends to happen more often with men than with women. So, why is this the case, and how can companies keep their organization from being full of inept leaders? Joining us now is Dr. Tomas Chamorro-Premuzica. He is the Chief Innovation Officer at Manpower Group. This is the largest staffing firm in the world. He's also professor of business psychology at Columbia University and author of the book, Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders? He went to NYU and received his PhD from Columbia University. Tomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on. So, Tomas, I just want to do a broad view and show our viewers just kind of what people are thinking about their managers. Let's pull up a chart here about manager qualifications. As you can see, 57% of people think their managers could benefit from training. 50% of employees think that their own performance would improve if their supervisor received more training in management. And 84% of people say that poorly trained managers create unnecessary work and stress. When you look at these numbers, does this surprise you?
Not at all. I think actually it surprises me that they're not even worse. There's a couple of reasons for these numbers. The first, I guess, is that typically we don't pick people for managerial or leadership roles based on their ability to lead, but mostly focus on how good they were at their previous job, something called the Peter Principle, which has been known for decades. And the other one is that we focus a lot more on confidence, bravado, charisma, and even narcissism than actual expertise and ability. So it's a sad state of affairs, really. And, all we can do is hope that things will get better.
So I'm gonna dig into the narcissism and the overconfidence in a moment. Failing up happens everywhere, right? The government, it's a great example. Social circles, even, you somehow wonder why the mean person ends up being super popular. But why does it happen so much in corporate America? Is there something about the way we are structured that facilitates this?
Well, firstly, I think it doesn't only happen in corporate America. It happens in politics. It happens in other countries. I grew up in Argentina, where this is, if you ask the average person in the world, whether the top senior leaders in politics or corporations got there because of their talent or some nepotistic or deception strategy, they will all agree with the statistics you just shown. But I think we expect more of corporate America, which has a sophisticated HR system with a lot of tools, technologies, and a science that should actually help us identify top leaders. But this happens way too often. So there is a gap, I guess, between our expectations and the bleak reality that we all encounter.
And your book asserts that this happens more often with men than with women. How did you determine that?
I didn't determine it, so it was just the research, and the research shows two things, which, if you aggregate them or combine them, explain this effect or account for this effect. The first one is that males are much more likely to be overconfident than females. So typically, men are more likely, statistically speaking, to overrate their abilities in any field than women are. And on top of that, when people do this, they're much more likely to be celebrated, rewarded, or reinforced for this unrealistic and irrational overestimate of their abilities when they're male rather than female. So if you're a man, you're statistically more likely to think you're better than you actually are, and that is more likely to fool other people into thinking that you're better than you actually are. If you're a woman, you're more likely to have a realistic sense of your abilities and talents. And in the weirder or rare case of your overestimating your abilities, you won't be rewarded for it. People will hold that against you.
So at what point then does the being confident or perhaps even overconfident become a bad thing? Because I'm sure that as well, being insecure and being unsure of oneself is equally as bad as well.
Yeah. I mean, everything is better in moderation, except moderation itself. So just like it's not very helpful to be pathologically insecure and be very inhibited for the individual, is not very helpful for the team or the system or the organization to have an individual who is radically overconfident and basically just plainly deluded or self-deceived about their abilities. So actually, normality should be sort of an ability to monitor your competence, your abilities, your skills in a relatively accurate way, so that if you are not very good at something, you understand it and then you can get better at it. And if you're very good at something, you understand it and you can perform. But unfortunately, all of the research shows that there's a very, very minor overlap between how good people think they are at something and how good they actually are at something, especially when they're men.
So you said normality is kind of the best thing, just to be sort of normal. But when I think about leaders and people who are celebrated leaders, they are everything but normal, right? They are singularly focused. They are dogged. They are, don't take no for an answer. And think of people, like Steve Jobs, who is often, one of the great leaders in corporate America and in innovation, but also, horrible to work with, according to many. How do you reconcile this? How do you this what seems like a paradox, in fact?
Well, I think, we gravitate towards people who are not just successful, but also eccentric, quirky, and who actually have somewhat of a dark side. There's a romantic element to seeing anti-heroes succeed, and not just Steve Jobs, who was notoriously narcissistic and somewhat antisocial and had some rather obnoxious tendencies. But also, if you look at the likes of Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, or before the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, Walt Disney, Henry Ford. I mean, I think there's something seductive about people who display some nonconformist features and who are either bad guys or a little bit contrarian, but have achieved success. But we shouldn't forget that they actually were also extremely talented. For every person who has Steve Jobs or Elon Musk's social skills and contrarian or antisocial tendencies, there are very, very few that actually have their talents. Many, many people think that if they're impulsive, excitable, and antisocial, they might achieve similar levels of success. But if you don't have the talents to back it up, you're just going to be unemployable.
I love that. If you don't have the talent to back it up, you're going to be unemployable. Dr. Tomas, I'm going to have you refresh your internet very quickly. Dr. Tomas is joining us from Istanbul, so his internet's a little laggy. So we'll say hi to some members who are joining us. In the meantime, we've got Anna from Romania, all over the world. This is amazing. Anna from Romania, Sharad from India, Susie from Florida, Angela from Arizona, and Martin from Quebec. Thank you for joining LinkedIn News Live. If you have any questions for Dr. Tomas, put them in the stream. I'd love to see or hear what it is like for managers and employees around the world, and this idea of failing up, of succeeding in spite of being somewhat incompetent. Dr. Tomas, I want to talk about this idea of faking it till you make it. there's certainly this this kind of idea that will help people achieve success or help people rise, and kind of encouraged. What are your thoughts on that? Is that good to achieve your goals, or is that problematic?
Well, I think we need to separate between what helps the individual and what helps the system. If I'm coaching you, Nina, or I'm in charge of helping a specific individual succeed within a system that is arguably rigged and that values self-presentation, confidence, even deception, and faking it till you make it, then of course I'm going to be as Machiavellian as possible and teach you all the tricks I can so that you actually pretend to be more competent than you are, and you fool others or you persuade others that you're amazing, irrespective of whether you actually are. But if we do this with everyone, and what we have is a system where people without any ability, without any integrity, without any competence get to the top, that's not a very beneficial system. It's not a very productive system. And, so I think we have to think not just about what's good for the individual, but what's good for everyone else. And so I think fundamentally, we shouldn't encourage anyone to fake it until they make it. We should encourage those who are tasked with spotting talent in others to focus on talent rather than on deception.
I love that. We've got a question from Bob in the stream, is asking one of the qualities, overconfidence is one of the qualities that is that is often rewarded. He asks, how do leaders tell the difference between overconfidence and just plain confidence? Great question from Bob.
I mean, the difference between confidence and overconfidence is mostly a difference of degrees. When I critique confidence, I mostly criticize overconfidence, confidence that is detached from your actual competence. If it is aligned, it's relatively helpful, although I think there's an underrated benefit of being somewhat insecure and not believing your own hype. We always sort of criticize or lament or even ostracize imposter syndrome, but I think mild imposter syndrome, not believing your own hype and not thinking that you're as good as you are, can be pretty beneficial because it forces you to actually get better. And I think fundamentally, every exceptional achiever suffers from a little bit of imposter syndrome because they're better than they actually think, which is why they keep on aiming for more and trying to be more and more successful, which is, of course, great for everyone else.
I had a boss once who we were in a meeting, and someone said something, and the boss just went, "Oh, I'm not familiar. What is that?" And was just so open about not knowing something that was assumed this person should know about. And I remember very distinctly hearing her say, "I don't know what it is. Tell me, explain it to me," and being surprised that she had done that, and in a way had showed some vulnerability of unknowing something. But in fact, my respect for her increased because she was just so plainly open about what she knew and what she didn't know. Yeah. Anyways, that's my story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's a great point, because we spent a lot of time talking about leaders and how leaders should be and what the profile of effective leaders should be like and what's the difference between good and bad leaders and great and good leaders. We shouldn't forget followers. And for a follower or an employee or a subordinate, which is not a very nice word, but still, we need for followers to have a certain level of maturity so that they can appreciate the value of vulnerability in leaders. On the contrary, if you as a follower just gravitate towards people who seem super tough, very macho-like and who seem fearless and who seem to know it all, there's a certain immaturity there that explains why you would gravitate towards overconfident people who might not be as good as you need them to be.
One question that we're getting in the stream from Al Noor is asking, if you notice bad management promotions happening, what would you recommend an individual do to speak up? This is a great question. Could be a bit difficult, right? How do you speak up if you notice that poor managers are rising to the top? Any ideas, Dr. Tomas?
Sorry, of why poor managers rise to the top?
No, so for what to do if you notice that happening in your organization. Any advice on how one can call it out? It's a question from Alur.
Okay, let me just refresh this so I can.
Oh, so let's say Dr. Tomas is going to refresh. He's joining us from a completely different part of the world. Let's say hi to some folks joining. Anthony in Philadelphia. We have Renette from South Africa, Tim from California, and John from Las Vegas. Welcome to the show. We are talking about why people fail up and what to do about it. We got a question from Al Noor, who is asking, what if you notice bad management promotions happening, what would you recommend an individual do to speak up? Dr. Tomas? Okay, he's gonna refresh again. Let's move forward. I read his book. Dr. Tomas's book is Why So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders, and this is a trait that happens more specifically with men than with women. Dr. Tomas, can you hear me? Okay, shall we? Yeah,
I'm good now. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, good. You quote a scientist in your book that writes that there are more psychopaths in the boardroom than in prison. And I thought this was fascinating. We touched about this a little bit already in the show, but talk to me a little bit about the traits of a psychopath and why psychopaths often make it into CEO leadership roles.
Sure. So first, it's important to understand that psychopathy is a quantitative trait. So just like height or weight or creativity or sense of humor. So some people have it more than others. And there is that range, or if you like, in a dark side sense, sweet spot, whereby people who are smart and socially skilled can be somewhat psychopathic, and that's a very lethal combination because it makes them fearless, quite charismatic. It increases their risk-taking and their appetite for power. And I think this is why, in a world that isn't very good at understanding the difference between style and substance, charisma and ability, confidence and competence, psychopathic individuals over-index in leadership roles. It's also important to understand that we mostly vet or evaluate people for leadership roles through interviews. The only people who don't get nervous, anxious, or somewhat fearful in a job interview and who are very loose, very relaxed, and as calm and cool-headed as they would be with their best friends are people who are somewhat fearless and often not just charismatic, but also somewhat psychopathic.
So being a little nervous during an interview is actually a good thing. So if you're interviewing and you notice the person you're interviewing is a little nervous, then that's actually a plus. I like that. Before I let you go, Dr. Tomas, is there anything that you've learned in writing this? Anything that you've learned in writing this book or in your years of studying this topic that just really strikes you, or that initially surprised you or continues to surprise you?
Sorry, what surprised me about writing the book?
Yeah. sorry about the technical issues, folks. My question was, what surprised Dr. Tomas? Last question: what surprised you when you were writing this book?
I think doing the research that evolved into the book, I guess the very obvious thing that surprised me back then and still surprises me now is how our society keeps on incentivizing people to express and display very, very high levels of self-belief and ignore feedback from others. If we glorify people's self-beliefs, their self-concept, and we just live in a society that tells people that they shouldn't worry about what others think of them, that if they think they're great, they actually are, and that they should be, they should believe that they are their hero in their own mind, then it shouldn't surprise us that a growing number of people displays narcissistic tendencies, and that when they do, we actually applaud and celebrate them. And then when that happens at scale, we don't end up with people who are humble, self-critical, curious, and competent. So, ultimately, it's frustrating that we know what good leaders should look like, and we still keep falling for this trap. And, I very much hope that at least for people who are in a position to change or adjust their beliefs, reading the book will help them reframe how they think about leadership and what decisions they make when they choose to work for someone or vote for someone or evaluate someone as a potential leader or not.
Dr. Tomas, thank you so much for joining us today, all the way from Istanbul. We really appreciate you spending the time.
Thank you, and I apologize for my connection.
Oh, of course. Next time, please come and join us in studio. We'll have a perfect connection there, I promise. That was Dr. Tomas Chamorro-Premuzica, Chief Innovation Officer at Manpower Group and author of the fascinating book, Why So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders. And thank you for all of your comments in the stream. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but we appreciate you commenting and having a conversation. You can continue the conversation here, or you can check out some of our other wonderful news stories to the right of your feed, or if you're on mobile, just click into the search box. And join us next Monday for a show about jobs for the formerly incarcerated, how ex-felons can get jobs and why it's an economic imperative, especially in this talent shortage world that we live in now. That is next Monday at 3 p.m. I'm Nina Melendez. Thank you so much for watching LinkedIn News Live.